Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending where you are. Welcome to this new session of the GEM Vietnam webinar series. Today, we have the pleasure to welcome Professor Thuy Toan and Dr. Hoa Phan, who are both researchers at the lab CESBIO in Toulouse, France. They will talk about agriculture in Vietnam under climate change, and especially about rice production. And this session corresponds more or less to chapter 4 of the COP26 GEM report. I will put the link to the report in the chat. So the presentation will last about half an hour. Then we will have half an hour of discussion with two discussants. So Dr. Renaud Mathieu, who is head of the Center of Excellence for Sustainable Agriculture of ISARC in Varanasi, India, and Professor Cho Nguyen Xuan Quang, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing well, who is Associate Professor and Vice Director of the Institute for Environment and Resources in Binh Duong Province, Vietnam. So thank you very much, both of you, for being here, and I'm sure the discussion will be very interesting for everyone. After this discussion, the questions will be open to the rest of the audience for about half an hour. During the presentation, you can, of course, ask questions in the Q&R in the Q&R device or in the chat, and that's it. So, Thuy, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I start to share my screen. Okay. Okay, can you see my screen? Yes. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, so let me arrange my screen. Okay, so our talk is about rice in the Mekong Delta, which is a part of the agriculture in Vietnam under the impact of climate change, and this is the number 8 of the seminar series. So I'm Thuy Toan from CESBIO, Toulouse, France, and I will talk with Hoa Phan and my colleagues at CESBIO as well. Okay, so this talk is, most of this talk is from the chapter 4. And here you see I acknowledge all the co-authors of the chapter 4. And in particular for this presentation, I have the help and co-author Alexandre Bouvet, Thu Trang, Lê, Stéphane Mermoz, and I use much information from chapter 9, co-author Seper Eslami, Philippe Minderhout, and Marie-Noël Voiles. And I also say that the part of the work is conducted in the two projects, GeoRise, the project of ISA, and Virsco, project of CNES. And here I have the logo of GlobeBio where Stéphane Mermoz is. Okay, then the first thing, the agriculture sector of Vietnam play a crucial role in economy, society, and environment. Here you can see that the GDP contribution of agriculture sector here is about 14.8%. Employed people is 1/3 of the population, and the planted area in green here on the map, less than half of the area of the country, and for agriculture is responsible for greenhouse gas emission in second rank. So agriculture sector is quite important in Vietnam. But then the projected climatic impact expected to be very severe. Here you can see rainfall and temperatures, changing ecosystem in Vietnam. Climatic projections show an increase of extreme weather, storm, drought, flood, sea level rise, increase the vulnerability to saline intrusion, And then those climatic change impacts are exacerbated by human activities in the Mekong Delta. Subsidence 2 centimeters here, increasing the risk of permanent inundation, coastal erosion due to the decrease of sediment transport, and change in the Mekong river flow due to upstream hydroelectric dams, and intensive agriculture, increased pollution and greenhouse gas. So the pictures is not nice, but let us see again the challenge facing the Vietnam Mekong Delta. The Mekong Delta is home to over 20 million of people here with some population density here. And it's account for 46% of rice production and 90% of the country rice export volume. So, and yet it is the most threatened by accelerating climate change and intensifying human impacts. And the impacts, or those impacts on rice production affect the farmers' income and Vietnam food security in 2 ways. The first is the impact on the area suitable to crop cultivation, and second, the impact on crop growth and then crop yield. The question to be addressed: how climatic and anthropogenic stressors are affecting and will affect the agricultural production? Are there ways to adapt and mitigate the negative impacts? And here in this presentation, we focus on few things. We address the rice production, rice planted area, and rice yield. And for that, we assess the change in rice planted area and rice yield in recent years, and to understand the causes of these changes, and then to attempt to projection in the future under different scenarios of climate change and human impacts. Methodology, we use remote sensing for observation and model and scenario for projection. Here, the remote sensing observation. The satellite radar is independent of cloud cover and to provide a free observation when adapted to rice monitoring. So those satellite radar from ESA provide the free of charge and available worldwide data in Vietnam and everywhere. And we use the data to develop a rice monitoring methodology in 7 projects, like GeoRice, VIRSCO. And we, the algorithms are based on time series of the backscatter signals. Every 6 days, we have the data in the Mekong Delta. And the products are rice map, cropping density, sowing rate, phenology, etc. Here, the example of the physics of the detection. Here you see the backscatter signal at 3 polarization. And here for An Giang, 3 crops per year. And here in Sóc Trăng, you can see that the loss of the 2020 crop because of drought and salinity. And here you can see an example of the crop transformed into aquaculture in 2019. So all the algorithms are based on our physical knowledge of the scene. Here is the background is the Google Earth background. Okay, the effect on the first thing we will look at is the effect on land suitable to rice cultivation. In the, I remind that in the there's 3 main eco-hydrological sub-regions in the Mekong Delta. The yellow one is the high flood zone, and the green zone are freshwater zone, having a larger shift between low inundation in the south, deep inundation in the north, and then from non-saline in the north and saline in the south. So it's a transition area. That area is very prone to any change in the next decade. And the coastal zone here, blue, where you have a drought, salinity, intrusion, and subsidence. This and how the rice, where the rice are grown in the high flood zone, the high tide allow flood season rice is the autumn winter rice. Here the dike ring have been in the last 3 decades, allowing the planting rice there. And in the coastal zone, large hydraulic structure have been built for sunwater prevention, and that allow dry season, winter, spring rice. Here you have a pocket of fresh water protected by all the structure and dike, and there's rice in Travin, Sóc Trăng, Manquer, etc. And here the detector rice for this season is very high, 1.6 million hectares. And then those development in the Delta in the last 30 years allow triple crops, 3 crops a year, whereas in the past, traditionally, there were 1 crops per year. The red one is a triple rice, 3 crops detected. Blue is a double, and green is a single crop or other vegetation. And however, we can see variability observed over years on the local distribution of cropping density, and the place where there are 3 crops now is 1 crop, and or 2 crops, etc. And the drivers of the variability is climate factors causing harvest loss, or autonomous adaptation by farmers, or regulation by local authority that we have to understand. And for the 2020, there was a severe drought, and then we observed harvest loss in coastal region. And here is the index, drought index and standard precipitation index for the drought severity. Is very severe, less severe, etc. And you can see on the coastal region have been impacted by the drought. And here is the drought index. The red is 2020, blue 2019, and the climate, the average from many years is there. So it's very hot from the very dry from January to March, April. And here the result is that we lost, here that we detect that there's a loss of 200,000 hectares in 2020 compared to the 2019. And now we have a close look on the coastal province. Here, Sóc Trăng and Travin. And I go fast here. Look at the Bạc Liêu here, and also the park of Sóc Trăng here and Travin. Okay, so 2017, 18, 19, 20. So in the 20 here, there was 3 crops a year, now 1, and here is on the 2 crops a year become 1. Okay, and then for the effect is accelerated by the further inland intrusion of the salinity. And for this, we use the data from CPL Islami in chapter 9, and we draw the ISO line of 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 20% per 1,000, which of the salinity at 15% of the time. And then we look at the rice here, the dry season rice that we observed in the last few years. And then we calculate how much rice in each of the, within each of the ISO line. And so we see that here, where the salinity is less than 0.05 per 1,000, 87%, and here 8.2%, less than 2 per thousand, etc. And then we decide that here 95% of the rice harvest percent found in region of salinity less than 2 per thousand. So it means that there was already an adaptation by farmers or regulation by authorities or else. Okay, and then we look at the scenario of CESBIO for 2050 and to ask the question how much and where the land become unsuitable for rice cultivation in future scenario of salinity intrusion. And then we make the scenario, and we will have a tool to do this kind of simulation. Like okay, here the first example, present salinity intrusion line, here the blue one, and if we take the sluice gate, it's the green one, the include the sluice gate, and the yellow is the project intrusion. And so different kind of projection. Here is 8.5 RCP. It's a high 3 or 4 degree increase in 2010. And this is the case also extreme subsidence. And then now I put here, we add riverbed level incision caused by for example, sand exploitation, and we can see now the affected rice area in the red is more than before, and then now if we increase the riverbed level incision, and we can have a much more impact. Here 200,000 hectares of affected area. Okay, so the impact on rice area significantly increased with the riverbed incision caused by river sand extraction. And here they removed all the sluice gate. If we don't have the sluice gate, all those areas is unsuitable to rice cultivation. And here, if the impact of the drought, because of the drought, lower the discharge, and the lower the discharge is a good thing for the against the saline intrusion. So sometimes it's and here is the example of the last case. He removing all the sluice gate. Okay, so the potential impact here I put the case of 8.5. And the impact, if you don't have the riverbed incision, here you have marginal. The impact is marginal. With the human impact, it's 30%. And now, if we don't have any sluice gates, then the impact will be much higher, 21%. And the impact of province, Tiền Giang, Vĩnh Long, Trà Vinh, Sóc Trăng, those provinces are quite rich, Tiền Giang and Vĩnh Long, so it could be considered. And now the second thing is a subsidence project to cause a shrinking of the Mekong delta due to the sea level rise and groundwater extraction. Then a large part is projected to be below sea level, and here is the project elevation by Minderhood in chapter 9, and here we look at the 2050 the project elevation, and we calculate how much and where the rice land must be underwater with sea level rise scenario. And here is the all season rise because of under the elevation touch on season rise, and here submersion area and with sea level rise 25 centimeters. It's by 2015 it's a manquer scenario, and then we have 3,000 hectare, 300,000 hectare impact. A case much more stable here. Recovery of groundwater level stable extraction is much more, and then increased extraction, even moderate, much more. So in this case, a lot of here, the sea level rise, 25 centimeters, we can have 18% in the case of moderate human impact, and 30% if we increase the extraction. And okay, so the person here, and with sea level rise at 60 centimeters, the impact will be very severe, 54 here and 45 there. Okay, so oh no. Okay, so a summary here for the moderate human impact. Here you have the salinity intrusion, and here is the submersion. For the salinity intrusion, the Mekong Delta people already have adaptation measure for salinity. It's extreme. Slough gate, dike, reducing the dry season rise already, and but the risk of submersion with sea level rise of 25 centimeters will make the southwest on this part of the province not suitable for rice cultivation. And for intensifying human impact, then the effect is much more important. 30% for here salinity intrusion, 30% here for the submersion, and in particular the freshwater province of Tiền Giang and Vĩnh Long here. Tiền Giang, Vĩnh Long here is impacted that they have not been impacted before. Okay, so what kind of mitigation measure? First, to reduce human pressure on the environment. So to have a nature-based solution, and for example, adapted number of crops per year to hunt over exploitation of groundwater, to hunt riverbed incision by reduction, sand extraction, etc., etc. And what is the short-term adaptation measure? To build protection infrastructure, to build reservoir to retain irrigation water, to avoid planting in area impacted by seawater, and to planting early, to modify the crop calendar, and to explore more efficient alternative to irrigation and combine aquaculture and high growing operation, and also to change crop type and change to other land use. But this should be considered together with the long-term adaptation measure. And okay, then I go to introduce the second part, and after that is where we take the rest. The second part is the impact on rice productivity or rice yield. And here for the rice yield in Vietnam, we can have here from GSO, the red one curve is the yield, the blue one is the area, and the yield keep on increasing until around here 2005, 2010. And here is in the Mekong Delta, the same thing, it's increasing and saturated. And then a plateau, which can be considered as potential yield, the yield we can get at a given geographical region and with the cultural practices and so on. And here, as we can compare with here the yield in other countries, South Korea, China, Indonesia, India, increasing and then saturated, and they saturate around 6 tons per hectare. In the future, the annual fluctuation in the rice productivity will be likely induced by climatic factor. And the question we want to address is how climatic and anthropogenic stressors are affecting and will affect rice yield, and ways to adapt and mitigate the impact. And the methodology is using ORISA 2000, process model for sensitivity study and for future projection, and using remote sensing product and scenario of climate change for modern input. Okay, so now it's Lisa Hoa will speak.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So I will continue this presentation by the second part on the modeling rice production in the Mekong Delta. So for the factor, there are two kinds of factors governing the rice production, that is natural factors and human factors. From natural factors, we have the geographic, such as the differences in temperature, the solar radiations, land and soil factors. So it's clearly the rice in Japan, for example, have the different yields compared to the rice in Vietnam. The second for natural factor is climatic. For the wet and dry seasons, the temperatures at different growth states will define different rice productivities. Also, the factor of rainfall or wind. For the human factor, we have the water supply, such as the irrigations and drainage for the water resource. The method of irrigations in the Mekong Delta, we have the method of continuous flooding and underwetting drying. Also the sources of water or salinity, etc. The next factor is the farming practices, the use of different rice varieties, the method of planting, direct seeding or transplanting, and the fertilizer, the pesticide applied also contributes an important different on the productivities. And the last is socio-economic, for example, the land tenure, credit availabilities and market accessibility, and also the farmers' knowledge and education for the rice cultivations. So, and sensitivities analysis for those factors that impact on the rice production has been carrying out, and in this study, we just carry on the difference in the climate factors impact on the productivities, because as we said before, the rice yields in the Mekong Delta, Vietnam, reached the potential yields since 2010. In this study, we used the ORIZA 2000 processor-based model for estimating rice yield. So ORIZA 2000 is an ecophysiological model which simulates the growth and development of rice, then simulate the rice yield. For this model, they use the climate, soil, and crop management as the input of the model, and they simulate the yields of rice. The innovation in these studies is we use the input from satellite-based data, for example, the Sentinel-1 data products from the crop management, which is always used by the default values in the literature. In this study, we use the maps of seasonal rice map, showing date, the rice varieties of long and short cycle, the stage phenology, the plant height, and the rice cropping intensity, the number of rice crop per year, as an input model for the simulations. And for the soil and climate, we use the information from the chapter 1 of this report. Yeah, can you slide? Here is illustrations of the products from the Sentinel-1 data. So mostly the maps of the rice products in using the Sentinel-1 data is we can see the maps in the Mekong deltas of the date sowing, the stage phenology, the plant height, rice varieties, and crop intensity at the pixel level. And from those maps, we can give out the parameters for the ORISA 2000, and we give the maps of the rice productivities in the Mekong Delta at a different level, or in the commune level or district, or even at the pixel level. Yeah. So here is an example of the simulations of the rice in the Mekong Delta from 2015-2020, because we have the Sentinel-1 data from since 2015. And here is comparisons with the ground surveys and sensitivity studies for the temperature increasing from at every 0.5 degrees. And we can see that the simulations is compared with the ground survey, and the Agence model at 2 degrees has the highest yield. Yeah, I think you can skip this slide because it's too detailed. So the important point of the simulations at different rice season is simulation of the water demand, which is also given out from the ORISA 2000. Here we simulate at the two method of water irrigations for continuous flooding and alternate wetting and drying. We can see that the continuous flooding, which is give the water in the rice field always, has the higher water demands than alternate wetting drying. And for 3 rice season per year, we have seen the different different water demand. So the summer autumn has the highest water demand compared to the 2 others rice season. This will give an idea of how can we get the rice yield affected by the water supply in the Mekong Delta. That is an example of the simulation result in the rice yield in the Mekong Delta. We see show the differences between the 2025 2030 and 45-50. So every 5 years compared to the 5 years in from 2015-2020. And the idea here is we can see the reduction or increasing from 4 to 7% compared to the present until 2020. So the point to emphasize in this point is temperature is not only one parameters that impact on the rice yields or rice productions, because can you next on because we see with the result in the literature the impact on the rice yield of an increase from around -7% if the scenario of increase for 1 degree. So here is a meta-analysis of the result from 5 report in 5 papers, and we see the effect impact on the rice yields is around 1.9 to 10 degrees, and it corresponds to our result on the rice simulations. So for the important point in this research is we can see the simulated rice yield and simulated rice area at the not only at the province scale but only at the pixel scales, which is thanks to the input parameters from the Sentinel-1 data. And also we see that the rice reductions is from climate scenarios can be combined with the result from the rice submersions. For example, here we can see the rice submersion in by 2050, and we can see how much rice is lost resilience losses until to 2050. The summarize for this research is at the regional scale. From our first simulations, we see the yield reductions were observed mostly in the second season, except in two provinces, with a reduction up to 7%. However, in two other season, winter, spring, and autumn, winter, resilience were simulated an increase from 4 to 7%. So the yield is projected to be fluctuate by minor to plus 7%. And from this, more simulations will be done with the climatic data, accounting also for maximum and minimum values of temperature and precipitations from chapter 1. The important is the overall rice productions is projected to be more affected by the loss of rice area due to the submersion, drought, and salinity intrusion than due to the projected rice yield. I will keep the summary for you.
Thank you, Hoa. Then the summary of this talk is the Mekong Delta has already been impacted by climate change, and the projection for the next few decades until 2050 indicated that the impact will be more accelerated. And we find that without adaptation, the risk of increasing salinity intrusion and that of permanent inundation will reduce the land suitable for rice cultivation. The loss is accentuated up to 50% in sea level rise, 60 centimeters, for example, by anthropogenic pressure, groundwater pumping, and sand mining. And the change in resilience was far within 7% variation, far less significant compared to the reduction of rice land. However, to derive the adaptation and mitigation measure for the agricultural sector over the coming decades will require assessment, again, a larger background of environmental, economic, and social evolution. And this maybe could be used in the overall simulation model like the one present in the chapter 10. So I thank you very much for your attention. And then, okay, Marie-Noël.
Thank you very much, Thuy and Hoa, for this very interesting presentation. Now we move on to the discussion. Maybe we can start with Professor Quang.
Hello?
Yeah. Okay. Do you hear us?
Yeah. I discussion first. On the second.
The floor is yours.
The first person.
You have about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Quang from Vietnam National University. I'm very happy to join the seminar today. Yeah. May I share the my slide for some discussion and some question on the presentation. Yeah. This is my information. My name is Toan Thuy. I'm an associate professor and doctor at the and vice director of the Institute for Environment and Resource under VNU, a member of Vietnam National University in Ho Chi Minh City. My research interests in hydrology and water resource management and urban flooding and climate change adaptation. I'm very impressed with the research today. It's very useful research for Mekong Delta at the current time and also in the future. I think the research have some advantage, like using the satellite data is very useful for assessing the spatial and temporal chain of the large area like Mekong Delta. And the research provide strongly database evidence and model-based evidence on the impact of climate change on rice area and rice yield in Mekong Delta. It's very important product of the Mekong Delta economy. It's ensure the food security not only for Mekong Delta, for Vietnam, but also for the world. So I think in the future, the rice product is very, very important, and Mekong Delta now under strongly impact of climate change. So this research will provide very potential database information to support for decision making in rice cultivation in Mekong Delta. But from my opinion, I would like to recommend some issue for further study. So you can see that now Mekong Delta is transforming from rice, aquaculture and fruits to aquaculture, fruits and rice. So not because of climate change, the land for rice is also reduced because it changed the economic structure in Mekong Delta. So I think we should consider the impact of the transformation from rice, aquaculture and fruits to aquaculture, fruits and rice on reducing rice area in recent years and future. I think this is very important. Yeah, and the rice on the international market could impact on the rice area. So how to take into account this information on studying the rice area reducing in Mekong Delta. And it should assess the impact of the more frequent occurrence of extreme hydrological events like drought, salinity intrusion on rice yield. And it also should compare the damage loss of the drought and salinity in 2019 to 2016 to investigate the effectiveness of the adaptation and measure. You can see the impact of the drought and salinity in 2016. It may be stronger, maybe heavier than the event happened in year 2019, but the damage loss is less than 2016. So I think we should compare the damage loss between 2 years, and it should consider the Mekong Delta plan in the future study, because now the Mekong Delta is the new plan for Mekong Delta has just approved recently time, maybe this year. And I also have some questions for the research. The first question that's how to create the saline isolate in this research you obtain from another research, or you for yourself, and the source of the data to you to create a salinity isolate, and how to define the loss area by it's only by subtracting the rice area between many years. And the next one, I would like to know, did you evaluate the impact of the upstream discharge from the Mekong Basin in this study? And the last one, I would like to know that did you verify the rice area obtained from the satellite data and the statistical data from the authority in Mekong Delta? Yeah, that's all of my comment for this research. I think this research is very, very impressive and very useful for Mekong Delta. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. I can reply, Marie-Noël.
Please go on.
Okay. Okay, so the question, saline isolate for salinity. So how could we do it? You see in the simulation of in chapter 9 or chapter Islami, the salinity is on the water in canal, river, etc. We make the isolate by relating, connecting a different canal and river salinity of the same value into to have the isoline. So it's an approximation because of the salinity in water is not the salinity in the soil, but so that we don't know how much the salinity in water could be considered river water as the salinity that affects the rice. And that's why after the isoline, we compare with the presence of rice within every isoline. And it's an empirical thing. Otherwise, you have to do measurement of the salinity of the soil water at every rice field. So this is an approximation, but without measuring precisely, we cannot do more. Your second question is to decide to define the loss area. The loss area is also we base for the rice area at present. We take the data from 2017 to 2020, and then to have a general pictures of the rice that have been planted recently. And then we, when we do the simulation of the salinity intrusion or the submersion, we use the map of the present time. It will be not right because in 2015, people will change completely the planting place, etc. But in order to evaluate what happened if the present rice, if those things will occur. And so the loss of rice area is compared with the present time. For the submersion, the maximum of pixel that we found cultivate in rice in the Mekong Delta. And for the salinity intrusion, we compare with the rice, winter, spring rice in the dry season from December to April. Is it okay, Quang?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's clear. Yeah.
The upstream discharge by different dams upstream, and this is included in the simulation by SEPER for the discharge, and they also they simulated the discharge by the upstream dam and also by the drought. And so we don't work on it, and then it was the presentation of Islami in the seminar number 2 or 3, I don't remember. It's Marie-Noël. Then the last question is satellite data as compared to statistic. Usually it's when we validate our data with the crowd survey, usually it's a good comparison if we use the plot the fin survey 60 fin or 200 fin by the team of Lâm Đặng Nguyên, then the validation is quite correct, more than 90%, 95%. But when we compare with statistics, then it's it's quite difficult because the statistic from GSO separate the rice in the season and for the from south to north, and the season do not season separation not correspond exactly to the separation at local place in the Mekong Delta. But overall, it's okay. Overall statistics is okay. But when you split into season, right? And then there's some mismatch between the definition. So we have to work with the statistic people in order to understand more. Yeah. Okay, so this is the reply to your questions. And then your something that you say in the in your presentation is the something interesting. And then you say that the impact of transformation of rice into rice, aquaculture, rice food, and so on. We can do that in another study to look at the change in how the rice, the land that people don't plant rice anymore, what they do. And we have seen a lot of transformation into aquaculture, but for the fruit tree, we need a bit longer time because since a few years we cannot see the fruit tree much. But this transformation we can see, we can look in detail, and it should be the topic of further study. Okay. Also you talk about the rice price on the international. Okay, everything needs to be considered with social economic factors, like for example, the reduction of rice area in the Red River Delta is mostly caused by the cost of the land. The people expand the urban area, and then the land is more expensive, and so is and this is one example. The second example is if the rise in price in international market is there's a lot of competition, and so I have seen that some of the change from 3 crops per year to 2 crops per year in Đồng Tháp is caused by they want to have a higher quality rice, and so it's longer cycle rice. So it's its own kind of reason, and this is a socio-economic study completed this kind of physical study, and a kind of complete model like the Luca model in chapter 10 could include all the effect of the social and economy. Yeah. Okay. Then also for the effect of drought and salinity in 2016 and 2019, exactly what we try to look now. In 2016, we found the detected impact is at 2,300,000 hectares impacted. In 2020, we found 190,000 hectares, so less impact percent than 2016. And now we are looking at all the program of building infrastructure. You see, during the period between 2016 and 2019. So it's interesting thing to look at. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so I think that I could, if Hoa, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think this is very interesting and clear what I answer. So I think I have no more questions. Yeah. Thank you very much.
So,
Thank you very much. Then maybe just to complement, because you, Professor Kwong, you put a question on Mekong Delta Plan.
okay.
Just to let you know that during this year work, we're working on a systematic review of Mekong development plan and adaptation plans. And we will compare with the evidence we have of future anthropogenic pressures or climatic pressures to see how well they are, if the current plans are seems adapted to what might be coming. But this is this year work. So maybe then we move on to Dr. Mathieu.
Can you hear me? Good morning.
Yes, yes.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. So I don't have slide personally. Thank you for inviting me to this seminar. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to learn about this project. Thank you, Thuy, for the presentation. I think it was very clear, and it's very clear that it's definitely a huge undertaking that you've done, a huge work. I can see from the report also that you have only presented a small part of it. So thanks. So my name is Renaud Mathieu. I'm with IRI, International Rice Research Institute, for 2-3 years now. I'm currently based at the South Asia Research Center in Varanasi in India. And my background is generally in remote sensing geomatics, so I'm not a climate change expert, so I probably would have a bias in my comments or my discussion and questions, focusing maybe a little bit more on the rice production data. So at IRI, I must say, yeah, we've been involved in obviously a number of geospatial applications to support principally rice productions, similar to what has been discussed in the seminar. Crop diversification, it's also one thing that we clearly look at using a geospatial angle. And also we look quite a bit about identifying geospatial envelopes or condition of suitability for variety dissemination, agronomic technology of scale, and stuff. Maybe more related to this presentation, I must say that we've also been involved in developing similar models of rice area mapping and yield productions, following similar techniques, obviously with remote sensing, Sentinel-1 and crop models. Maybe some of you have heard about RICE, so remote sensing based information entrance for crop in emerging economy systems, so which basically produce also similar type of product, which is also applied in the Philippines and also in Vietnam. So comments. Well, first I would like to really emphasize the importance of this technology and hence the benefit of this type of work, which is done by CESBIO and the AFD. I think definitely the crop area and yield mapping is amongst the top application for geospatial and remote sensing. I think for a long time there was not so many development because we were lacking operational satellite data for allowing this type of applications, and this was kind of lifted with the development of the Sentinel data, which have been used in this work, especially the radar data, since rice monitoring occurs frequently in quite cloudy regions with the monsoon and all these type of things, and radar systems are quite permeable to clouds. So here we discuss a bit the context of long-term simulation, use of the data. I think there is also another component which is more immediate monitoring with season variability in comparison with past performance, so really near real-time assessments. I'll have some question about this a bit later. But I want to say that and re-emphasize maybe for the community that first, these data are free, they are frequent, we can get them every 6 to 12 weeks, they are detailed, we can work at 1 hectare's scale, they are secured. There is an operational system with Sentinel secured with at least 2030, and that's very important from an operational perspective. We can monitor wall to wall. early information delivery. So the models that have been discussed by Thuy and Hoa can provide data early, mid-season, and early after the harvest. I mean, we well know that the statistics take 6 months at least to be officially compiled on the ground. They are linked to crop performance, and that's also an example of what the model Hoa mentions by integrating phenology and crop biomass. So I think that's also critical. It's not just a mere vegetation index. And it's also methods which are consistent and comparable across countries. So we use the same data and generally the same methods. So comparisons between regions becomes. So yeah, I wanted to emphasize that because I think it's quite important in terms of maturation of the technology. And actually, it brings me to my second point, because in a way, I think that much of the technical challenge have been kind of solved to a large extent. I mean, maybe some people could criticize this, but there is a little bit of work around model calibration, validation, transferability, and all these type of things. But I think it's important for me to mention that the next steps, in a way, in terms of development, it's kind of use of these data by national partners within their national context. I think one of the main challenge to us at IRI, based on our experience, it's how do we get these data and this technology really used beyond the proof of concept or beyond the R&D project for informing policy and supporting farmers locally. I think to me it involved a number of issues, like the long-term familiarization of local teams with this type of data. It's not just like, okay, let's use remote sensing and everyone uses remote sensing. The data needs probably to be produced by the local teams, so we need to train these teams and we need to have a long-term and they need to be, these data need to be used really in a national structure, so to be integrated in local policies and applications. I mean, it doesn't mean that obviously this project or other projects don't have their impacts, but I think the next step to think about it, it's around this. How do we get the data systematically used by a wide range of national and or private users? How do we convince crop, land manager, ministry that the data are accurate? I mean, this was touched when we're talking about validation. You know, typically we compare our data with the government data, and we kind of assume that these government data are the golden truths, which is not, and they have obviously some shortcomings. So there is all of work needs to be done to also convince local communities about the opportunity to use this data, at least in a complementary fashion with existing systems. And last, how do we ensure that local teams have the expertise and the skills and the long-term support beyond the projects? So that's also something important. We tend to manage things according to projects, which is understandable, but has also some shortcoming in terms of long-term. So that's the main comment I wanted to make. I don't know if you want to react, or Thuy, and then I can go through a few questions. So I can also go through the question if you prefer.
Okay, so I can react on one thing that the you think that the next step should be to make use that the national stakeholders make use of the kind of tool, simulation tool, and so on. And this is our aims is to implement our methods in for example in Vietnam, for the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. Right now, part of the method have been used by the team from VNSC Lâm Đào Nguyên in Ho Chi Minh City, and then we are working with in the SCO VIRSCO, Scotia Space Climate Observatory of CNES on Vietnam in Mekong Delta, and then we try to we work with also the national team, and for that we do capacity building. We do user consultation, and the objective is to implement the part which is validated by the national in different ministry. For example, in order that the people can use the tool to see the simulation. If we do that, what is the impact, etc. And this, for this VirtScope project, we, for example, we plan to have the user workshop shortly in few weeks now. And also we plan to go to Vietnam for how to implement it better. Because right now we have a start to implement in the data cube in Hanoi, but then it's we should much more expand this idea. Thank you very much for your suggestion. Okay,
how much time still I have, Marie-Noël? Maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes probably, no?
Yeah, you can, let's say 5. Let's keep 10 minutes, 15 minutes for questions in the audience. I see that there was in particular huge, quite a number of comments about saline-tolerant rice varieties. So I think we can talk about that just after.
Okay, so I'll pop 3 questions quickly. So rice ecosystems are quite diverse, and I was in terms of agronomic practice, crop performance, including across the world, but also within Asia, in terms of production, varieties, irrigation, practice. And so I was wondering, how do you think that the model that you've developed in the Mekong area could perform in other type of rice-based ecosystems? And what do you think would be required to facilitate the transfer of these models to other maybe less friendly environment, because the Mekong is quite known to have generally large and dense rice fields? So that's one question. I also had some question about the validation of the product. I would extend the question of my predecessor also on the yield, because the yield obviously it's a bit more of a complicated things than the rice area. You know that the rice needs quite a lot of input parameters, which sometimes are not there. So I was wondering if you did also some ground survey CCs to compare and assess your. And then finally, a lot of the presentation was about quite long-term climate change analysis and these sort of things. And I was wondering if, and you mentioned that in the introduction, if we look at extreme weather events which are already happening now, flood, droughts, which are impacting largely farmers' production and directly today's, how do you think that you could use actually all this technology and data sets to try to protect the farmers' incomes and enhancing their production? So maybe if I can rephrase it, is there a way to mitigate extreme events which are negative for the farming community on the short terms?
Okay, so Hoa can reply to some of the question, some part of your question, but the first thing I can reply is how to apply this to other regions. And for the rice area, we in the Zero Rice project, we have done with 5 countries in Southeast Asia. But there's the problem is a lack of validation, in situ validation, due to the COVID. We could not go there, and then we don't have fund to pay people to go to the field, etc. But I think that the method can be adapted to any region. Meaning, first you have a method good, quite good for everything, but not very accurate. And for the for national application or local application, you have to refine the method because of the control and practice are not the same, or confusion with other plans, etc. So this is the first thing. The area could be done. The modern, then we'll reply to that. And for the long term, also the long term, the extreme events that we also will work with the team of Professor Ngô Thanh to see whether we can project the extreme events in order to just to say that if you plant the rice during this season or at that date, then you damage your crop with the probability of occurrence of this extreme event. So to avoid the planting at that period, etc. And now, Hoa, you can reply to the rest of the question.
Yes, I can reply for the questions of how to apply this modeling to other regions. As we know that ORISA 2000 is an ecophysiological model that stimulates the growth and development of rice with the input of from the climate, the soil, and from the cultural practice of rice. So if we have on the parameters of the region, for example, the rice, the soil and climate is okay. The point is on the crop management. So we need a lot of survey data from the crop management, for example, the crop calendar, growth state, because it will the model will simulate the rate of development. So different rice varieties will give a different rate of development. Also, on the parameters of fertilizer, irrigations, it will impact on the model. So until now, this ORISA 2000, they develop for the lowland rice, but a lot the new version of ORISA, they adapted for different rice in different ecosystem. And we already have some result of the rice yield simulations from ORISA for the rice in the Philippines, in India. I think there are some results in rice in America also. So mostly we will need a set of parameters that which is adapted for the rice in the region, so we can apply it for other areas. And for the validations of the rice yield and production for products from the Sentinel-1, we in this study we make the collaboration with some laboratory and some research institution in Vietnam, for example, VNSC in the south of Vietnam, and also from Erie. For the rice varieties, mostly we use the yields production from Imhan, that they have a set of rice yields from 1960 until now, but for the products of Sentinel-1 we will need just only from 15 to 2020. So for the rice simulation until up to 2050, we just simulation with the parameters of the climate from the work package 1 with your validations of the gradients. Yes, that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So maybe we can take a few questions in the audience. I saw in the chat that there were many, well, at least several questions concerning rice practices. Sorry, rice cropping practices. A few, some were on the question of using saline tolerant varieties. Question, is it already done in the Delta? And if it is it really profitable? Because there was a comment saying that they have lower yields, and also that they require they require protections against salinity with dikes and sluice gates, which are costly. So are there some cost benefits analysis on that? And there was another question concerning in the different practices of continuous flooding versus wet and dry. Where are in which areas do farmers one or the other practice, and what drives their choice, and can it be a solution, or what could be the effect on adaptation to saline water intrusions?
Okay, so I can reply to the thing that we are looking at is which area farmers use continuous flooding or wet and dry, wetting, alternate wetting dry. Okay, so then for the observation, with our satellite, we cannot follow the water under the vegetation during the whole cycle. But there's other satellite with a longer wavelength that could penetrate into the vegetation and see that. But right now, what we have done is to see that the long cycle rice, for example, in Dong Thap, they have new varieties that is they get more income by new variety like jasmine or Taiwan rice, and they practice continuous flooding and longer cycle rice. And for that, they can detect long cycle or short cycle by the time series of the signal. And then, for example, in Dong Thap, we know that the long cycle corresponds to continuous flooding. Why so? Because the portfolio for those fields that you must not use pesticide, herbicide during the cycle, and the water can avoid the weed, and etc. And then without using the chemicals. And so it's the indirect guessing of the where continuous flooding and where alternate wetting drying. And right now we saw that about 20% of the delta is AWD, no, continuous flooding. Before it's 100%, now it's 20% of continuous flooding. So it's reduced drastically. And so for the water saving, it's good, but also for the methane emission, and not the same case in the north and in the center of Vietnam. So that this kind of thing we want to look at with other satellite right now. Thank you. So this is the question about which area farmers use continuous flooding or wet and dry. Well, you can complete this this reply.
Yes, I have maps of rice varieties in the Mekong Delta, so I can say exactly where. So mostly we have
It's
just quickly, I can say that most of the area in the coastal area, they use the method of continuous flooding. So 20% of the area in the coastal area, they still use the continuous flooding, and 80% of the rice area in the upstream in the Mekong Delta, they have the under wetting drying, because here they use the new rice varieties of as Thuy said, for the longer cycle. So they use the new method of water management. And also in this area, they have the very good infrastructures of the dike and etc. So they apply this method. So most of the area in the coastal area is continuous flooding.
Okay, so this is okay. So we took another question.
Yeah, there was a question about saline tolerant varieties.
Okay.
Is it already done, and is it profitable, and etc.?
Okay, okay. So this when I talk to people in the Mekong Delta, they say that there are varieties suggested by the University of Cần Thơ, for example, and they plant it, but the rice is not very good, and so the price is low, and compared to the cost of the infrastructure, it's the people I asked say that they will turn it to aquaculture for shrimp or fish or other thing or food rather than to have sun tolerant rice. The sun tolerant rice will be used in places where there are a big problem of food security. But in the Mekong Delta, there's still a lot of the rice to be exported. So it's now the farmers tend to go to more quality, to better quality for more income. And the sun tolerant is to really to adapt to the lack of food, and this is not yet in the case of Vietnam. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
I look at the question on the.
So what is the overall effect of water table recharge salinity on the change of practice from 100% continuous flooding to 20% only now?
The driver of the change is the double. First, they save the water. The second, you see they follow regulation by authorities. I saw also people recommend AWD everywhere in the Mekong Delta compared to other countries where there are more continuous flooding. And so the person in the Mekong Delta follow the regulation, the driver of that. And also less labor when they don't have to maintain the water at the level of 10 centimeters all the time, and because they have to put the water in all the time. Now they have to to look at if the water go down to under the soil surface of 10 centimeters or 15 centimeters, then they put the water. And also they have to understand that the plant requests water at the critical stage of the rice crop, like a flowering or like end of tillering or tillering. So they also I think that there's an instruction from the internet and from the television about all that. So it's quite good. Okay, so
I have an additional question on because you said that using so the wet and dry practice leads to a higher consumption of pesticides, right?
Yes.
So did it the change of practice did it have an impact on water quality in the Delta? So did it lead to increased pollution issues, water pollution issues? Yeah.
Yeah, and that also is one of the things that we have to look in the globality, and then if you don't have the water during certain period of the year of the growth, and then you have with the unwanted vegetation, and then in the past they continue flooding, but now they have a pesticide, herbicide, but also this could also be optimized by just to put a small amount during a critical period, and this is a longer study. Okay.
Okay, I can just add more information about the rice water management in the Mekong Delta. So the informations of percentage between continuous flooding and wetting drying is 2080. Is not exactly for on the season, because remember that in the Mekong Delta we have 3 rice seasons per year. So it depends on the season. We have different percentage of the rice, because it's they will use also the rainfall water for irrigation. So it's not only it's not exactly for on season.
Yeah. So it's and also during the other season we have water. There's a lot of water, and then the impact will be the methane emission during the season since June to November. There's too much water, and then there's the other problem is the methane emission. And then if they can practice this by having earthwork around the field in order not to have the inundation on year round, it would save also methane emission. There's
so maybe
2 things, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we are running a bit out of time. Maybe we take a very last question. There's a question of whether you can share a bit more about the system in terms of forecasting or early warning for rice cultivation. Recommendations, sorry.
Recommendation.
The question is in the chat.
Okay, then we relied on the early warning for the weather climate early warning. Yeah, and then in this case, if you have the tool, you can see where the rice are growing and at what stage, or when you have to sow the rice in the next few weeks, etc. You can actually adjust your calendar with the early warning of climate. And during if the rice is already there, for example, at the end of the season, where you have a storm coming in the north or in the center, and the rice is already ready for harvest, you have you can harvest it a few days ahead of time, something like that. So if you have the tool, and the farmer in Vietnam and the ministry, we know exactly what to do in order to prevent from damages, etc. Here we talk about the effect, the long-term effect of climate, etc. But then there's disaster monitoring is another topic that needs real-time monitoring. And for those satellites, it's very, very good, because you have one data every 6 days, and you can build your model and your mapping tool in order to treat the disaster in near in time. So
thank you very much. So I see a question for me concerning sediment trappings by dams. I'm not at all specialist of that. There was a recent paper released from Philip Minderhood investigating the potential of organic sedimentation to counteract, to compensate for subsidence. So maybe the paper also tackled the issue of fine sediment load in the rivers. So I confess I can't answer the question. So also, sorry, we're running out of time. So okay, fine. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Thuy. Thank you, Hoa. Thank you, Dr. Mathieu and Professor Quang. So this is the end of this webinar. The next one is next week, and it will be dedicated to labor productivity and household revenues. So thanks again, everyone, and have a nice day to all.
thank you all. Yeah, thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.